Hello students. Today we are going to discuss the 7th chapter of your geography syllabus, that is human activities and environmental degradation. Now, when you talk of the environmental degradation, it is the effect on the environment that is taking place as a result of the human activities. That is, quality of the environment is deteriorating as a result of the human activities. In fact, if we look at the advancement of civilization, we find that the environment has been affected as a result of different activities which have taken place as a result of the progress of civilization that has taken place. Earlier, man or human beings at the start of the civilization, they basically depended on the nature. Basically, they were nomads. Normally, they used to live in caves, and their time was spent on mainly hunting and food gathering, or at most self-defense from the forces of the nature. So his lifestyle was totally dependent on the nature. At that point of time, whatever he used from the nature, it was replenished by the nature. In fact, the nature or physical or biotic processes of nature actually has got a self-regulatory style of working. That is, whatever you use from the nature, if it is within the limits, it has got the capacity to restore itself, and that we call as homeostatic mechanism. That is the capacity of the environment to replenish itself. But what has happened is that the human beings, as the civilization progressed, he actually learned the use of many things. First, he learned to use the fire. Then he learned to do farming. Then, over a period of time, he developed wheels, which actually accelerated the pace of the development. In fact, the Industrial Revolution which took place in Europe during the 18th century, this Industrial Revolution actually not only helped in the progress of industry, science, medicine, technology, but it also resulted in the cutting down of the forest, creation of land for settlements, agriculture, industries, roads were developed, factories were developed, cities were developed, and ultimately it was at the cost of the natural resources, particularly water, soil, forests, and minerals, particularly coal and petroleum, along with iron, copper, etc. all were used in an excessive manner. In fact, thereafter, in the 20th century, the world war that took place, testing of military weapons, and particularly the scientific research that took place, it actually resulted in the changing lifestyle of the people, and also economic development started changing the face of the planet. In fact, it has affected the entire world today. It has resulted, the development of civilization has resulted in the excessive use of resources. It has resulted in environmental pollution. Environmental pollution, which actually includes land, water, and air pollution. Along with that, it has resulted in deforestation. It has resulted in unplanned development, that is, cities have mushroomed without any proper plan. It has resulted in what we call global warming and climatic change. It has resulted in increase of population and it has resulted in increased traffic, which again directly affected the greenhouse gases, and of course along with all this it has also resulted in increasing testing of the military weapons. Now all this together ultimately has resulted in what we call environmental degradation, which in simple words mean decrease in the quality of the environment. Elements of the environment like water, air, soil have been affected by such environmental degradation. In fact, the environment always has a certain limit that which cannot be exceeded, but as a result of the development processes that has taken place throughout the world, we have exceeded that limit, or we have exceeded the homeostatic mechanism, and it has created lots of problems. In fact, you would find as a result of the excessive cutting down of the trees, soil erosion have taken place, floods have become frequent, loss of biodiversity, then expansion of deserts, loss of soil fertility. These are only some of the effects of environmental degradation. Now, environmental degradation is something which should not be confused with what we call environmental pollution. Environmental pollution and environmental degradation. Environmental pollution and environmental degradation both of them are different from each other. When you talk of the environmental pollution, particularly it refers to certain elements of the environment. It basically refers to the decline in the quality of water, decline in the quality of air, decline in the quality of the soil. That is actually environmental pollution. But when we talk of the environmental degradation, it is the total decline of these qualities in such a manner that it cannot be repaired for a long duration of time. When the damage is complete, then we call it as environmental degradation. Like for example, if we say arsenic is something which pollutes the groundwater. Now, if this exists for a long duration of time, then the quality of underground water will decline, and as a result, in the long run, there will be problem of water scarcity, land erosion, etc. So, pollution is something, environmental pollution is something which can be repaired, damage can be controlled. But in case of the degradation, the damage is complete, nothing can be done about it. Now, when we see the causes of environmental degradation, there are two causes. Causes of environmental degradation. There are two causes. One is, of course, natural causes, and another one is man-made causes. Now, natural causes includes natural hazards like earthquake, volcanism, cyclones, tsunami, landslides, etc. Whereas when you talk of the man-made causes, it can be development of agriculture or particularly using modern methods of agriculture. It can be development of industries, development of transport, and other different measures which has been adopted by the human beings, like construction of the cities, unplanned urbanization. You would find it has resulted as a result of the development. Human beings have dammed the rivers, they have cut down the forest, and as a result of which the quality of the environment has degraded. These natural causes also affect the environment, but all of you human beings cannot do anything about it. Like earthquake, if it occurs, nothing can be done about it. Volcanism, cyclones, all of them cause maximum amount of damage. But in this case, the human beings, by their activities, they can bring about not only landslides. If trees are cut in the forest areas, then landslides can occur. Excessive use of groundwater lead to drought. It can also relate to other activities which affect the quality of the environment. Now, if we look at the sum of the developmental activities that the human beings undertake, it has resulted in number of problems for the environment. Some developmental activities which the human beings undertake for their survival. One is, of course, increase in agricultural production. Then they undertake what we call accommodation or shelter, and better lifestyle. Then for their own benefit, they produce electricity, and also number of multi-purpose river valley projects have been undertaken. Now, okay, now this increase in agricultural production, this of course human beings have managed to do by modern agricultural method. What they have done, they have used chemical fertilizers, they have used pesticides. Along with that, they have used irrigated water. All of this ultimately have helped, no doubt they have helped in the agricultural production. But in the process, what they have done, they have affected the soil, the water, and also killing large amount of aquatic flora and fauna. What happens is that when increasing amount of fertilizers are used in the soil, that as a result of the runoff water during rainfall, it actually goes on or flows into the nearby water bodies like ponds, rivers, and ultimately affecting the quality of the water. Then, of course, as a result of the building up of cities or urbanization, which human beings have done for accommodation and better lifestyle, but it has come at a cost. That is, wherever cities have been developed, in many places you would find underground water have been tapped. Earlier, if you look at the development of cities, they had taken place mostly along the banks of the river. ज्यादातर डेवलपमेंट या शहरों का डेवलपमेंट किसी नदी के किनारे पे होता था पहले, but now you would find development of cities have taken place far away from the sources of water, which not only affects the underground water, it also creates air and noise pollution. You would find in the cities, if the proper planning is not there, water logging is a common problem, जो कि कलकत्ता में थोड़ा सा बारिश होने से तुम लोग को मालूम है क्या हो जाता है. And of course, traffic congestion, drainage, sanitation problems, shortage of housing. These are the common things which have affected any urban areas. Now, production of electricity or development of the power plants, of course, is necessary for running of the industries. But as a result of the production of the electricity, particularly by use of burning fossil fuels, that is coal, it has resulted increased quantities of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which has affected the temperature and of course balance of heat on the surface of the earth, resulting in what we call global warming phenomenon. Then multi-purpose river valley projects of course have been constructed for number of benefits, supplying irrigational water, production of hydel power, flood control. But large dams, whenever they have been constructed, they have not only affected the flow of the river, it also has affected the environment in a number of or many ways. Now, what has ultimately happened as a result of the environmental degradation? Now, as a result of the environmental degradation, first, droughts have become common, pollution of air, water, soil have become common. Then, along with that, there is of course scarcity of water, biodiversity have been affected. It has also resulted in global warming and climatic changes in different parts of the world. Then floods have become common. Natural resources have been depleted. These are only some of the effects of environmental degradation. In fact, you would find as a result of the excessive use of the environment, number of man-made disasters have happened. You may have heard about the Bhopal gas tragedy, which had happened in 1984 on the night of December 2 and 3 actually in Bhopal from a closed factory of Union Carbide Limited, a deadly gas, that is methyl isocyanate gas, leaked out of the cracked tank, and as a result of which it had resulted in the deaths of many people, and more than 2 lakh people were affected, and their problems or effect has been so drastic that even today, after so many years of that disasters, people are still suffering from the problems. Along with that, there is of course some other nuclear disasters. One is of course Chernobyl disaster, which took place in 1986. तुम्हारे किताब में गलत लिखा हुआ है, 1908 लिखा है. It took place in 1986. Actually, at that point of time, Ukraine, the country today, it was part of जो अभी at that point of time it was part of USSR, but now an independent country. From a nuclear power plant, it actually resulted in the explosion in the power plant, which released harmful nuclear waves from that plant, which affected large section of the people. Same thing happened in Fukushima as a result of tsunami that occurred in Japan in 2011, when the Fukushima nuclear power plant, also heavy water from the power plant was released as a result of that. Now, what the human beings can do to control the environmental degradation? In fact, human beings, particularly conscious citizens, are not sitting actually idle. Environmentalists have been campaigning to make people aware of the dangers of which the environment is facing. Some steps to control environmental degradation which can be taken. One is of course illiteracy and poverty. Illiteracy and poverty needs to be tackled. Along with that, alternative source of energy. Alternative source of energy needs to be developed. That is increased use of what we call solar energy, wind energy, hydel power needs to be encouraged so that dependence on the fossil fuels is reduced. Then recycling of resources should be there. Consumers particularly should be made aware of the recycling of the commodities. Then per capita consumption of the natural resources needs to be decreased. That is, human beings need to control the use of electricity, use of water, though they may be paying for it, but they need to control the use of these things. Along with that, awareness should be created so that people become aware of the consequences of the environmental degradation. Then of course, planning for any project and its consequences on environment needs to be taken into account before any industry or developmental activities is taken into account. Also, human beings must allow the other living things, animals and plants to grow in their natural habitats, and most important, the national governments must actually take necessary action to take care of the environment. In this context, a Earth Summit was held. The first Earth Summit was held in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where almost 178 countries attended this Earth Summit. Now, in the Earth Summit, an agenda which is popular as Agenda 21 was actually taken into account. Along with that, the concept of sustainable development was also introduced in this Earth Summit. Now, what is actually sustainable development? Sustainable development actually means use of resources in an optimum manner. So that needs of the present generation as well as future generation can be fulfilled. In other words, we should not be using the resources in such a manner that हमारा यूज हो रहा है तो हो रहा है, बाकी को मिले या ना मिले क्या फर्क पड़ता है. We should keep the resources intact for the future generation. So this concept of sustainable development was introduced in this Earth Summit. In fact, Earth Summit took place 10 years after that in 2002 in South Africa, which is actually 10 years after that. It is also referred to as Rio plus 10. Then another last one took place in 2012. That again was held in this Rio de Janeiro and popular as Rio plus 20. Now, if we look at the problem of environmental degradation, particularly in relation to India, we find that in India, the environmental degradation has affected the country very much. In fact, we find that according to a World Bank report, almost 4,80,000 crores of wastage in terms of money is done. That is the cost of the environmental degradation in our country. In fact, a recent survey of 132 countries regarding environmental degradation finds India at 126th position. In fact, we find 13 of the 20 most polluted cities of G20 nations. G20 nations, actually, these are some of the developed countries of the world. We find 13 of the 20 G20 polluted cities are located in India only. In fact, in India, the problems of degradation of agricultural, forest lands, misuse of resources, public health standards, unplanned development, poverty, loss of biodiversity, these are some of the common things which has affected the country. In fact, in India, some of the developmental projects have actually affected the environment much more. Like for example, Green Revolution. Green Revolution that is associated with increase in the agricultural production in the 1960s and 70s and country becoming self-sufficient in our food grain production. But with the excessive use of fertilizers, excessive use of pesticides, this green revolution, which was highly successful in Punjab and Haryana, has now actually affected the soil of those regions, and the same soil is not productive enough now. Along with that, we also find that if we look at the environmental degradation, particularly in terms of Kolkata, what we call the Kolkata wetlands, this you may have seen. तुम लोग ने यहाँ पे निको पार्क पक्का गए होगे. निको पार्क के एक साइड में तुम्हें एक एंड में बहुत बड़ा सा वाटर एरिया दिखाई देता है. इनफैक्ट दिस एंटायर जो सॉल्ट लेक एरिया है, at one point of time it was part of this wetland, but it has been filled up and construction have taken place. Consequence is of course groundwater level has fallen, the soil as well as the groundwater is saline. इसीलिए तुम्हें मालूम होगा कि सॉल्ट लेक में जितना भी एरिया है उसमें जो टैंक से पानी सप्लाई होता है, all of them is of course saline water. Of course recently now filtered water has started to flow into the township area. To save the environment in India, number of people have taken the initiative. Prominent figures among them is of course Sundarlal Bahuguna, Medha Patkar and Baba Amte. These are some of the popular figures who have taken measures for saving the environment. Sundarlal Bahuguna is associated with Chipko movement, which actually took place in 1973 in the Garhwal region. At that point of time it was Uttar Pradesh. Now of course it is in Uttarakhand. It was to save the trees. People actually tied themselves to the trees so that the trees could not be cut. Medha Patkar is of course associated with Narmada dam movement. Baba Amte of course associated with Buddha movement. Now, in spite of all these problems, what one can do to save our environment? At least we can keep our neighborhood, school, homes clean, and of course plant trees to save our environment. And we should be conscious of how we use the electricity and water. It should not be wasted. Also, overuse of electrical equipments like refrigerators, air conditioners, etc. should be less, and of course we should aim at using less amount of fossil fuels, as well as we should reduce the domestic waste, and of course create awareness programs. These are the ways by which we can save our environment. Well, that was all in this chapter. Do go through the book once. The questions, of course, I will be posting next week. I hope you have understood the chapter. Thank you all.